She walked into her ex-husband's mansion expecting one final insult, but when the will was read, the entire room went silent. They laughed at her for showing up, until they realized she now owned everything. What she did next shocked them all. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel as a sign of support. Lena Carter never thought she'd hear from the Thompson family again. After her divorce from James Thompson 3 years ago, she had cut all ties with his bitter parents and snobby siblings. So when a certified letter arrived inviting her to James's will reading at the Thompson family estate in Savannah, Georgia, she was stunned. Even more shocking, James had passed away in a sudden boating accident. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reread the elegant script on the thick envelope. The Thompsons had always looked down on her. She was the small-town girl who worked in a flower shop, never good enough for their golden boy James, who came from old money and graduated from Duke. Their marriage had lasted 5 years, strained by pressure from his family and his growing detachment. Despite their rocky past, Lena debated whether to attend. She felt a mix of confusion, sadness, and curiosity. Why had she been invited? Surely James had already updated his will after the divorce, right? Her best friend Carla insisted she go. Girl, if nothing else, go and show them you're thriving. Let them see you shine in their smug little faces. So Lena picked out her most elegant navy blue dress, touched up her makeup, and made the 2-hour drive to Savannah. The mansion loomed as always. White columns, long drive, live oaks draped in Spanish moss, a place she once thought would become her forever home. Instead, it was the site of her deepest heartbreak. As she pulled up, a valet took her car. Guests mingled on the porch, glasses of wine in hand. The whole Thompson clan was there. James's parents, his sister Veronica, and his younger brother Preston, all dressed in designer clothes and wearing that same air of superiority. They barely acknowledged her when she walked in. "Oh, look," Veronica sneered. "She showed up." Lena lifted her chin. "James invited me. I have just as much right to be here." Mrs. Thompson gave a tight smile. "Well, dear, it's nice of you to come. I suppose James had a soft spot for nostalgia." The lawyer, a balding man named Mr. Franklin, stood and cleared his throat. "We'll begin shortly. Please, everyone take a seat." Lena sat near the back, the air heavy with tension. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into something far more complicated than she imagined. As the doors shut behind them and the lawyer opened the file, Lena had no idea that this uncomfortable afternoon would change her life forever. The parlor of the Thompson estate was just as Lena remembered. Grand, cold, and full of judgment. Floor-to-ceiling windows cast a pale glow across the room's polished wood floors, and portraits of long-gone Thompsons stared down from the walls like silent jurors. Lena sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, trying to ignore the sideways glances and hushed whispers coming from every direction. Veronica leaned close to her mother and whispered something behind her hand. Mrs. Thompson's lips curved into a smug smile as her eyes flicked toward Lena. Lena had always known they never accepted her. Even during her marriage, they made it clear she was an outsider. They accused her of marrying James for his money, even though she signed a prenup without hesitation. James had assured her that one day they'd come around, but they never did. Mr. Franklin, the attorney, shuffled through his papers, adjusting his glasses. "Thank you all for coming. I know this isn't easy, especially under such tragic circumstances. James left very specific instructions for how this reading should be conducted, so I ask for your patience." Preston, James's younger brother, snorted. "Let's just get this over with. We all know where this is going." Lena narrowed her eyes at him. The arrogance was unchanged. She could almost hear him back in the day, telling James, "You'll regret marrying her." Franklin ignored the comment. Per James's instructions, I will read this aloud. There is also a video message, but that will come after the document is presented. He cleared his throat. "To my mother, Margaret Thompson, and my father, Richard Thompson. I leave the family china collection and the antiques in the front parlor, which I know are of sentimental value." Margaret sniffed, obviously unimpressed. "To my sister Veronica, I leave my art collection in New York and the cabin in Aspen. To Preston, my vintage car collection. Preston's eyes lit up. About time, he muttered. Lena sat still, bracing herself for whatever comment or slight was coming her way. She expected her name might not even be mentioned. And to my former wife, Lena Carter Thompson? Franklin paused for a moment, glancing up from the page. I leave the remainder of my estate, including my Savannah home, all financial assets, business shares, and investment accounts. The room fell silent. Veronica blinked rapidly. What? Franklin adjusted his glasses again. Per James's express wishes, Miss Carter is the primary beneficiary of his estate, receiving roughly 87% of his total assets. Margaret shot up from her seat. That must be a mistake. She's not even family anymore. Franklin shook his head. Mr. Thompson updated his will 6 months ago. Everything is legal and binding. Lena sat frozen. Her ears rang. The estate, the business, the home she had once been forced to leave. The entire Thompson family was now staring at her, their smugness replaced by stunned outrage. But Lena didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The silence didn't last long. Veronica jumped to her feet, her heels clicking against the marble floor like gunfire. This is outrageous. He divorced her. She doesn't deserve a dime. Preston stood too, his face flushed. She must have manipulated him. That's the only explanation. Maybe he wasn't in his right mind. Lena didn't move. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her face calm, composed. She was just as shocked as they were. But she wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing her flustered. Franklin remained calm, flipping through his notes. Mr. Thompson underwent a full psychological evaluation before drafting this version of his will. He was of sound mind. There's also a video message which I was instructed to play immediately after the reading. He gestured to a young assistant who rolled out a television cart and loaded a USB stick into the screen. The room dimmed slightly as the video began to play. James appeared on the screen, looking healthy, casual, and more sincere than Lena remembered. He wore a navy sweater and sat in front of a fireplace, probably in the very home Lena once lived in. Hi everyone, he began, his voice calm. If you're watching this, it means I'm gone, and some of you are probably throwing a fit right now. Lena bit back a smile as Veronica let out an exaggerated scoff. James continued, I know this may seem surprising, but I've had time to think these last few years. I've made a lot of mistakes. Letting Lena go was the biggest one. I let pressure from all of you push me into a life I didn't want. She never wanted my money. She wanted me. And when things got hard, I didn't stand by her like I should have. Veronica crossed her arms, eyes narrowed. I revised this will after reconnecting with Lena briefly last fall, James said, glancing off camera for a moment. She didn't want anything from me. Not money, not apologies. She just wanted peace. And that, more than anything, showed me who she really is. Lena's eyes burned. She remembered that brief encounter at the farmer's market. It had been unexpected, civil, and bittersweet. He'd asked how she was. She'd told him she was doing fine. That was it. So I made my decision, James continued. The rest of you have always had money. You'll be fine. But Lena, she deserves a fresh start. She deserves everything I didn't give her during our marriage. This is my way of making things right. The screen went black. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Margaret let out a choked breath, part disbelief, part fury. How dare he betray us like this? Franklin cleared his throat again. The video was his legal testament. Everything outlined in the will stands. Lena stood slowly. I think I'll be leaving now. As she walked past the family that once tried to break her, no one dared say a word. The drive back to her apartment felt like a dream, or maybe a strange movie she was watching from the passenger seat. Lena sat in silence, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as the Thompson estate grew smaller in the rearview mirror. The towering oaks lining the Savannah road swayed gently, but nothing could calm the storm swirling inside her. She had walked into that mansion expecting cold stares, maybe even a brief, awkward mention in James's will. But she never imagined she'd walk out owning nearly everything the Thompsons valued. James's words echoed in her mind. This is my way of making things right. Still, she didn't know how to feel. Vindicated, absolutely, but also confused and guilty. Not because she'd done anything wrong, but because James had waited until after death to finally stand up for her. When she reached her small two-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, she found Carla already waiting for her inside, pacing with nervous energy. "So?" Carla asked the moment Lena stepped inside. "What happened? Are they all still alive, or did someone drop dead from shock?" Lena closed the door behind her and leaned against it. "I own everything." Carla blinked. "Come again." Lena pulled the letter from her purse and handed it over. The house, his investment firm, the properties, his accounts, all of it. Carla's eyes widened as she read. "Girl, this is insane." Lena nodded slowly, still trying to make sense of it. "I don't even know what to do with it all. I never wanted his money. I just wanted them to stop treating me like garbage." Carla flopped down onto the couch. "Well, you got both. So now what?" That question lingered over Lena for the rest of the night. She barely slept, her thoughts running wild. The next morning, her phone began blowing up. Texts from numbers she didn't recognize, voicemails from reporters, even a call from Preston. She didn't answer any of them. Instead, she called Mr. Franklin to confirm everything. The lawyer, sounding slightly amused, assured her the documents were in perfect order and the estate transfer was underway. Within 30 days, she would have full control over James's business holdings, as well as the Savannah mansion. "But you should be prepared," Franklin added, his tone turning serious. "The Thompson family will likely contest the will. It's their right. They're, well, not taking it gracefully." "I figured," Lena said quietly. After hanging up, she stood in the middle of her tiny kitchen and stared at the cracked tile floor. Just yesterday, she'd been clipping coupons. Now she had more money than she'd ever dreamed of, and a house she never wanted to return to. Still, something inside her had shifted. This wasn't just a win, it was a reset. The Thompsons had humiliated her. James had let her down. Now she held the power, and she was just getting started. It was a cloudy Tuesday afternoon when Lena returned to the Savannah mansion. This time with the keys in her hand. The front gate swung open at her command, not at someone else's permission. As she drove up the long cobblestone driveway, she tried to steady her breathing. The last time she'd stood here, she was a heartbroken woman leaving with a single suitcase. Now she was the legal owner of everything within these walls. The house was eerily quiet. No hired staff, no lingering family members, just the creak of hardwood and the scent of lemon polish. Lena stepped into the grand foyer, her heels clicking against the marble. The chandeliers above sparkled as if they knew things had changed. She took a deep breath, remembering the way Veronica used to roll her eyes every time Lena tried to host a dinner party. The way Margaret would insist the china had to be handled by someone with grace. And the way James used to apologize to everyone for her. Well, look who's holding the title deed now. The living room still held traces of her former life. Photos of the Thompsons lined the mantel. Expensive art hung where her thrifted paintings once had. She began pulling the pictures down one by one, stacking them neatly in a box. Not out of spite, but because she planned to make this space her own, finally. An hour later, the sound of tires crunching the gravel startled her. She peered out the front window to see a familiar Mercedes. Margaret Thompson. Lena hesitated, then stepped outside before Margaret could ring the bell. "Margaret," she said coolly. The older woman stepped out of the car, dressed in pearls and wearing her usual expression of forced civility. "Lena," she replied. "May I come in?" Lena crossed her arms. "Why?" Margaret offered a tight smile. "I think we should talk. About the will. About the misunderstanding." Lena blinked. "It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was James's decision." Margaret's smile faltered. "He wasn't thinking clearly. You were divorced. You don't belong here." "But I do," Lena said firmly. "James made sure of that. And whether you agree or not, this is my home now." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "You think this changes who you are? You're still the florist girl who tricked her way into our family." Lena smiled politely. "And you're still the woman who lost everything to the florist girl." Margaret's mouth opened, but no words came out. "I'm being civil," Lena added, "but if you keep showing up here uninvited, I'll have to take legal steps." Margaret turned on her heel without another word and got into her car. Lena watched her drive away, heart pounding but steady. Back inside, Lena stood in the center of the house and exhaled. This place had once felt like a prison. Now it felt like victory. By the end of the week, Lena had met with lawyers, financial advisors, and even the staff at James's former investment firm. Each meeting brought its own set of challenges: confused looks, veiled skepticism, and the occasional outright disbelief. "You're her?" one executive had said, trying and failing to hide his surprise. "Yes," Lena answered firmly. "And from now on, every major decision passes through me." She didn't know everything about running a financial firm, but she knew leadership, and she had common sense, empathy, and a strong work ethic. It was more than she could say for the Thompson family, who had used the company's profits like a personal ATM for years. James had left her detailed notes and memos, surprisingly thoughtful considering their history. He'd also appointed a mentor, his former CFO, a sharp woman named Rhonda Tate, to help guide Lena through the transition. "I always thought James underestimated you," Rhonda had told her during their first meeting. "Nice to see he finally got it right." Back at the mansion, Lena's days became filled with activity. Gone were the silent, echoing rooms of old. Interior designers came in to help transform the space, not to something flashy, but warm, colorful, and truly hers. She added art from local painters, cozy reading nooks, and even reopened the neglected greenhouse in the backyard. Carla visited often, helping her organize donation pickups. Lena had no interest in keeping the designer clothes Veronica had left behind, or the expensive trinkets that reminded her of awkward dinners and forced smiles. "What are you going to do with all the money?" Carla asked one night as they sat on the porch, sipping iced tea. Lena thought for a moment. "I want to start a community garden in town. Maybe a scholarship fund too, for girls like me, ones who didn't come from much." Carla grinned. "You're going to make them all real nervous." "Good," Lena replied. "They should be." True to Franklin's warning, the Thompson family filed a legal petition to contest the will, but it fell apart quickly. James had been far too meticulous. Every signature, every clause, every recorded video showed clear intent. Lena wasn't just legally untouchable, she was undeniably chosen. When the news finally hit the local papers, "Florist turned heir reclaims fortune in stunning will upset," Lena received a new wave of attention. Some curious, some admiring, some hateful, but she no longer cared. What mattered most was that, for the first time in her life, she was making decisions on her own terms. Not under someone's thumb, not for approval, and definitely not from the shadows of the Thompson name. She wasn't here to prove anything to them anymore. She was here to build something better, with or without their blessing. 6 months after the will reading, Lena stood in the middle of Thompson Square, a small park on the east side of town that now looked nothing like it had before. Where there had once been dying grass and crumbling benches, there were now vibrant flower beds, paved walkways, and a sign that read, "The Lena Foundation Community Garden, in memory of new beginnings." Children ran through rows of sunflowers while older folks tended vegetable beds. Local students volunteered on weekends, and every single brick of it had been paid for by Lena's inheritance. Not out of guilt, but out of gratitude for the life she had now and the life she could help others build. Carla clapped her hands behind her. "Girl, you did it. This place is beautiful." Lena smiled, wiping sweat from her brow. "It's not done yet. I'm adding a little library next month and a greenhouse. You better be careful. People might start calling you Mayor Lena before long." Lena laughed. "Let them." The transformation hadn't just been external. Lena had changed too. She stood taller, spoke firmer, made decisions without second-guessing herself, and most of all, she had learned not to carry shame for other people's bad behavior. A few weeks after the park launch, Lena received a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a short, handwritten note in familiar cursive. "You turned out to be everything I wasn't brave enough to believe in. Thank you for forgiving me, even when I didn't deserve it. James." There was no apology, no begging, just a final recognition of the woman she'd become. She tucked the note away, not in bitterness, but in peace. Later that evening, she stood in the upstairs hallway of the mansion. The grand house no longer felt like it belonged to someone else. It felt lived in. Light streamed through newly uncovered windows, and the smell of baking bread from the kitchen reminded her of home. She stopped in front of a door on the far end of the hall, James's old study. For a long time, she'd left it untouched, out of a strange mix of respect and avoidance. But tonight felt different. Lena opened the door and stepped inside. Dust hung in the air, but everything was just as he'd left it. Books still lined the shelves, and the leather chair sat tucked behind the polished mahogany desk. On it was a photo frame turned face down. She flipped it over. It was a picture of her, years ago, laughing at something off camera during a backyard barbecue. She hadn't even known the photo existed. Lena exhaled, set the frame upright, and closed the door behind her. Let the Thompsons stew in their pride. Let the town whisper. Let the papers keep spinning stories. She had walked into that mansion broken. She left it whole. And in every sense that mattered, Lena had inherited far more than money. She had reclaimed herself. Lena's story is a powerful reminder that dignity can't be taken away. It can only be reclaimed. From being humiliated and discarded to owning the legacy she was once denied, she rose not through revenge, but through resilience, grace, and purpose. If you enjoyed Lena's journey, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs a reminder that the underdog can, and often does, win in the end. For more inspiring retellings, hit that notification bell so you never miss an update.